Well, welcome everyone. It's interesting that there's been such a sudden growth of interest in bus rapid transit around the world. In fact, if you track the growth of bus rapid transit internationally, it's almost growing at a logarithmic growth rate. And you can trace that growth to some very specific BRT projects. One of them is Curitiba. Curitiba was the first city in the world to actually invent bus rapid transit, what we call BRT. And after Curitiba opened its what's now certified as a gold standard BRT system, many systems across Brazil tried to copy it, but they didn't really copy it fully. They sort of tried to do something on the cheap with curbside bus lanes or even some central median bus lanes, but they didn't have all the features. And so it deteriorated the brand of bus rapid transit in Brazil. And Brazil then didn't build any new BRT until quite recently, when Rio just this past year opened the Transoeste BRT system, which is also ranked gold. So why is BRT taking off around the world? Well, partly Transmilenio opened in Bogota, Colombia, and Mayor Peñalosa, who's ITDP's president, took huge courage to take the Curitiba model and then actually make it work for metro-level demand. So Bogota's Transmilenio is moving more than 35,000 passengers per direction per hour, which is more than most metro systems carry. So cities saw that model, and they realized that they could meet their very high capacity transit needs using bus-based mass transit systems. And that suddenly was a wake-up call to a lot of cities, like the cities in the C40 network, that realized they couldn't afford metro or heavy rail-based mass transit, and that this BRT was also a solution to their problems. So after Transmilenio opened in Bogota, you saw this exponential growth of BRT systems around Colombia, particularly into Latin America, then into Asia with the opening of Transjakarta and then of Beijing, and finally into Africa with the opening of the Reavaya BRT system here in Johannesburg. The reason it's taking off is that it's a fraction of the cost of a metro system, and it's at least a fifth of the cost of a light rail-based mass transit, but it proves to deliver in most cases the same capacity and the same speed of a heavy rail metro. It also is faster to implement, and this speed of implementation is very important to the mayors of this network, because if you're the mayor, you can decide, I'm going to implement a bus rapid transit line in one of my corridors and have it open before the end of your administration. And that's what happened with another one of our cities. Mayor Macri from Buenos Aires opened a BRT, and it increased his popularity quite a bit, and you'll hear about that. What impact does BRT have on carbon dioxide and greenhouse gas emissions? The truth is it depends. If you've built a very poor quality bus improvement and you're calling it BRT, but it isn't real BRT, it might actually make your carbon emissions worse. So how do we know we're getting real BRT? You know, there's a lot of copycat bus improvements out there that aren't real BRT that lack some of the critical features. And the critical features are things like off-board fare collection and beautiful enclosed stations with boarding and a lighting that's at level with the bus floor. And usually it's in the central median of the road reserve. And usually you're not allowed to turn across the busway. All of these features you have in the very excellent silver standard BRT system here in Johannesburg. But people don't necessarily know these things because they're technical details. So ITDP published this thing called the BRT Standard, which is a pretty easy to use ranking system, and there's a technical committee composed of all the leading BRT engineers in the world, and they certify certain systems for quality. Curitiba's Linha Verde is gold standard. Johannesburg's BRT is silver standard. Some systems are not BRT at all. They're calling themselves BRT, but they don't meet the baseline criteria outlined in the BRT standard, And that gives us a metric. And it turns out that your carbon benefit is pretty closely correlated to whether you have a high score in the BRT standard or not. So your score, if you're applying for GEF money, for instance, the Global Environmental Facility money, you take your BRT standard score and you plug it into some other metrics using something called the TEMP model, which the Global Environmental Facility recommends you use when applying for GEF money. And if you have a lot of demand on your corridor and you have a high BRT standard score on your design, you're more likely to get approval for the GEF because it pretty well tracks how much carbon benefit you're going to get. We have, if you don't, if you let a lot of systems get built in your country or a lot of corridors in your city that you're calling BRT and they're not real BRT, what happens is the public starts to get dubious. What is this BRT thing? And they don't want it. You know, a classic example of this is Boston. Boston promised this poorer neighborhood that they'd get BRT, and the community didn't know what that meant. And in the end, what it meant was an articulated silver bus with a poorly enforced curb-aligned bus lane, and the community was really mad about it, and they don't really want to talk about BRT anymore. Whereas in other cities which got real BRTs, the community's usually really very positive about it and thinks it's great. So it's important that we make sure we're talking about real BRT systems. And fortunately today we have representatives of cities that have all implemented very good quality BRT systems. And hopefully we can learn from those systems. And one of the things we learned for sure is that getting them implemented takes a political champion. And it takes a political champion because you're going to have to do some things that some people in your community are not going to like. But if you want to protect the interests of the citizens as a whole, you're going to have to fight sometimes with the neighbors who want to keep that parking space in front of their building or their shop, or they're going to want to keep that left turn because they make that left turn, but in fact it's slowing down everybody on the bus. So what a great BRT system takes is a brave mayor that's willing to stand up for the general interest of the public, and it's not a lot of mayors that are willing to do that, but we have had in the 3 cities represented here, amazing mayors that push through very good quality systems. So first, we're going to hear from Sérgio Póvoa Pires, the president of the Urban Planning Institute of Curitiba, where BRT started. Welcome.
Changes. Is that okay? Okay, nice to be here. Let's have some fun. The things I'm bringing to you were our dreams, the things that made us think about those way of thinking about buses and bus systems in the period when Brasilia was being built, and that meant automobiles. These were the main things that were going to happen. That was the synonym of progress. And we went in the other direction. We were talking about mass transportation system, pedestrian streets, green areas, and that has proven that we were right. And this is what's happening today. We are in a very nice, let's say, standard of life in Curitiba because of various reasons. And these are something of the things that I want to share with you. Okay? So, what happens?
Curitiba, capital city of the state of Pará in south of Brazil. 1,800,000 inhabitants. 3 million in the metropolitan area. A cultural city formed by immigrants from dozens of countries. About 50 years ago, long before becoming a metropolis, planned the future and projected itself with simplicity and innovation. Growth has been rapid but orderly, and its effects were kept under control. In the 70s, when the concept of sustainability was formulated, Curitiba was already showing its practical contribution, By creating an efficient transport system and low cost of deployment, it became the BRT now used around the globe. The parks, a city brand, control floods and ensure healthy and free leisure. Curitiba has one of the highest ratios of green areas per inhabitant in the world and was a pioneer in the recycling of waste. With this learning, Curitiba now plans the next 50 years. With the same creativity of their urban tradition, regard for metropolitan integration, multimodal mobility, health, and education. The measure is the men, human planning. Public hearings and interactivity democratize decisions. Municipal public policies reduce inequality and make the city more humane for all. Only in 2013, 5,000 subsidized dwelling houses were built.
The investing in the public education system will become in the next 3 years to 30% of the municipal budget. The investment in health increased by 23% in 2013.
Youth participation is the new focus of Curitiba sustainability. In the Portais do Futuro, future portals, youth assumes their own destiny with entrepreneurship, art, sport, and participation. Curitiba and the metropolitan area are home to worldwide companies attracted by its quality of life, proximity to the port of Paranaguá, and major consuming markets of Mercosur. Our metropolis has an excellent infrastructure for lodging, food, and fun. The Corrente Cultural cultural chain literally in September, the music workshop in January, and the theater festival are examples of the vibrancy and diversity of culture. The patrimony comes within the scenario of sustainable business with a creative and digital economy. Curitiba, a unique city, a melting pot of cultures, tradition, and imagination that come together to create the Brazilian capital of sustainable development.
Okay, this is just to give you an input what the city we're talking about. Just for you to know, this is how Curitiba looks like. We have a metropolitan region. This is in the southern part of Brazil, 400 kilometers south from São Paulo. And this is where the bus train rapid transit runs in the middle of those high-rise buildings. So when we are talking about this type of concept, we are not talking only about mass transportation. That is one of the biggest mistakes that most of the cities do. What we think is that we need to put together three things: land use, transit systems, and mass transportation. All of that together will bring and put the man in the middle of everything. So the human being for us is the measure of everything. So this is what made Curitiba such a model in this point. This is the whole area of Curitiba. This is the numbers. This is how it runs. There are 13 cities of the metropolitan region that are part of our integrated mass transportation system. We have an agency that is responsible for that. It's called URBS. It's the mass transportation agency of the city of Curitiba. And I, beside being the president of the Institute for Research, I am also the president of the Council of Administration of the Mass Transportation Agency of the city. The fleet, 2.275 buses, 355 lanes, 250 urban and 105 metropolitan ones. This is a full integrated system. Of course, that began back in 1974. So what we are talking about is the improvement of a system. You know, we were born thinking differently. That's why we're here now. This is just for you to have an example. This is one of our main buses. We call bi-articulated buses. They are produced in the city of Curitiba. And these are the bus stations. We call it tube stations because the operation of the bus is in the same level. So that makes things easier. You get more time and so forth. This is how we think. This is the Trinair access. Here we have two areas for traffic. Vehicles in the middle of the red one is where the buses run. This is how it looks like. These are the different types of biarticulated buses. This is the new one that we have for 250 people. We transport per day 2.5 million people in the city of Curitiba with buses. So this is what we have been doing as well with biodiesel and hybrid buses. So we are thinking about going ahead, not only using the oil and fuel like that. And then we are going for the future with smart electromobility. We are planning something very interesting. We're going to have the subway now. It's going to be open in the 2020. And that will replace the BRT in the main axis. And in that place, we are going to build 2.2 kilometers of linear park. We are going to have the longest linear park in the city in Brazil. So we are giving back that to the pedestrians, to the bicycles, to everybody. So it's, let's say, we're putting the BRT underground, and on the ground we are giving back to the pedestrians. So this is what we are thinking about the future in that thing. And here is our vision. We share three types of pillars. One of them is to make Curitiba a much more humane city, and these are the areas that we are taking care of when we're talking about humane education. We're going to increase in 30% until 2016. Health, security, youth, handicapped people. This is very important to give accessibility. We are the first city that put braille inscriptions with the names of the streets in the corners of the city. Then, when we call about innovation, next year, the institute where I am president will complete 50 years of old. It's the most prestigious urban planning institute in Brazil. So in order to celebrate that, we are bringing a vision of what's going to happen with Curitiba for the next 50 years. So we are putting those things together. The smart multimodality transport, bikes. We are going to build until 2016 300 kilometers of bikeways. And also helping the sidewalks and make them more accessible to all types of people. Walkable communities, this is the term. Green and creative economies, this is what we are attracting all types of investments. If you want to come to Curitiba, these are the two areas that we put in lots of effort. So come there and bring your help to that. Climate change, urban comfort, disasters and prevention and risk management. This is a great program that we have with the federal government. Different from other cities that we have been hearing today, we are getting along very well with the federal government. And we are putting lots of things together. And the other part is to make it more inclusive. That means participation of the population in the future of the city. That means we have lots of public audiences, all the projects that we put together. The subway, for example, is one of them. We're going to hear the society. We divided the city into public administration areas, as we call. We have sub-mayors. And each one of these 9 sub-city halls, as we can call, will have discussions about the subway and how it's going to be implemented. So all the big programs that we develop, we hear the population. So we put all the ideas together, we have them telling things to us and helping us, and then we bring them again what we have put together and so forth. So these are the 3 main pillars, and we call it the plus city, the city of the most innovative, the most humane, the most inclusive, and so on. It's a simple way of thinking. So this is what I wanted to share with you today. Thank you so much.
Next, we're going to hear from Horacio Rodriguez Larreta, who is the chief of the cabinet for the city of Buenos Aires, which I'm proud to say won the Sustainable Transport Award this year for the remarkable changes that they brought about just over the course of the last couple of years.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon to everybody. It's a great honor for me to be here today with all of you, sharing our experience on how to improve the quality of life for inhabitants of this beautiful city that we all represent. Buenos Aires has 3 million people, and on working days, another 3 million entering into the city, 40% of them by car and 60% by public transportation. Within the city of Buenos Aires, 70% of the people use public transportation. The majority of these, 75% around, use buses. The rest, subway, taxis. The city of Buenos Aires used to have a very well-organized and consolidated transport system with high standards of business efficiency. It has a fleet of 10,000 buses, one of the biggest in the world, but that had to share the street space with cars, which generate congestion. It also has about 60 kilometers of subways. However, in the past, let's say 30 to 50 years, there was no significant public investment in transportation, and therefore no achievements on sustainable mobility. Let's say a couple of highways built 30 years ago, and not more than 10 kilometers of subways on the last 20 years. Only one branch of the suburban railway was electrified, and some road works were done in the access to the city. The private investment was mainly focused on the fleet, that's why it's quite modern. When we started office in 2007, we developed a mobility plan and put it as a very high priority, although we knew that it would face resistance because it implies significant changes to the city's layout. There was no BRT or nothing similar. Also, the institutional framework is a major challenge because it's a project that needs a joint effort between the national and the local government. And different from Curitiba, we are on the opposition, with opposite parties, our local government with the national one. The bus system is under the jurisdiction of the national government, and the buses are now very highly subsidized, which gives no incentive for quality improvement. On the other part, all the infrastructure is constructed by the city. Our mobility plan, which is an essential part of our urban planning system, is focused on promoting public transportation and on reducing the use of private cars. The aim is to improve the service, taking advantage of the current bus system. Since 2007, we have built 20 kilometers of preferential pathways for buses that allow us to considerably reduce travel time and to move bus routes from neighborhood narrow street to avenues. And since 2011, so only 3 years ago, we deepened the process and developed the BRT system, despite the opposition from the federal government who regulates and controls the bus system. We just build the infrastructure, and then from one day to another, we forbid the buses to ride on some streets, so they have to move to the BRT lanes. At the end, they accept it and adapt to it, moreover after its positive results. In addition, we convinced the bus companies that this new system, the BRT, we would have a very positive economic impact on the sector. Nowadays, all the fleet has diesel engines with a capacity between 60 to 120 and 140 passengers. But any change on the characteristic on the fleet requires coordination with the national government. Then that's something that can hardly be solved in a short time. But for the medium term, we are developing tests to incorporate hybrid and electric buses. However, the rationalization of the routes has already generated efficiency, impacting heavily on the quality of the environment and reducing emission. Our strategy was to phase implementation. In 2011, we constructed the first BRT in the country with an extension of 12 kilometers. The first one was strategically installed on a low conflictive zone that had only 2 bus lines, but with very high visibility because it crossed all the city. It immediately achieved very good results and significant users' acceptance. This way, we could show the expected benefits at a lower and controlled scale, avoid general resistance, and at the same time that the project benefits could be widely perceived. The first and successful experience, encouraged us to go for something much bigger. We have recently, let's say 6 months ago, launched two new corridors. One that has had an incredible impact because it's in the 9 de Julio Avenue that goes across the city's central area and represents a landmark of great significance for our country. It's like building a BRT on Champs-Élysées or at the Fifth Avenue. The entire morphology and landscape of the avenue was changed. The corridor connects the central area with the city's southern, the other corridor connects the central area with the city's southern limit. In only 3 years, we developed a new passenger transport network that at present has an extension of 40 kilometers. The 9 de Julio Avenue, which is considered the widest in the world, worked almost at a highway, but highly congested. It had 16 central lanes used by cars and 6 lanes at the side for buses, cars, taxis, loading and unloading, hotel operation. The avenue used to cater for the majority of the north-south traffic flow across the city's central areas, which is the main hub for employment, administration, financial, judicial, commercial, and educational activities. Today, with the BRT project, there are 4 lanes at the center of the avenue exclusively for 11 bus lines and a central corridor for bus stops. The reorganization of traffic flows across the avenue generated a very positive impact for all the actors in the avenue. For pedestrians, 9 de Julio Avenue, with its 20 lanes, used to be a real urban barrier, very complex for the pedestrians' mobility, almost impossible for disabled and older people. With the BRT, the distance for pedestrians was shortened with intermediate supports. Now you don't need to cross 25 meters without scale. Actually, the pedestrian crossing is only 15 meters long with boulevards in between. A place that until recently was a monument to cars is now a tribute to our citizens, producing a great transformation. Every 10 people that walk around the 9 de Julio Avenue, 4 of them do it through the pedestrian path that connects stations, which has generated a new walking circuit, not only because they seek the bus stops, but also because we have created a public place of quality, well illuminated, safe, and well organized. For public buses, which is the main transport system in Buenos Aires, travel time for the whole BRT corridor was reduced dramatically, from 55 minutes at the peak hours to less than 20. Just imagine how many days per year the 250,000 people that travel both ways every day gain for the free time. Cabs also saw an important improvement since the lanes next to sidewalks are now free of buses. Combis are like shuttle minibuses, privately operated, that used to share lanes with buses, cars, and taxis, and were an obstacle to traffic flow when loading and unloading passengers. Now, within the BRT project, an underground terminal was created for the operation of combis that significantly alleviated congestion and benefit all combi users, more than 50,000 per day, that have now an indoor waiting area safe and comfortable. For private cars, traffic flow also improved a lot. Since there is additional lane by each side of the avenue, cars are separated from buses, combis do not park in the area anymore, and some traffic turns have been eliminated. Although the BRT project have the objective of reducing travel time for public buses, which, as I said before, did it and a lot, all these measures have also reduced the travel time for cars from 40 to 27 minutes for the whole corridor, also a great amount of time. But probably the most amazing characteristic of this project is that it has been built in only 7 months, just the time we promised when we started the works. 9 de Julio BRT reduces emissions of greenhouse gases. It cuts 5,600 metric tons of CO2 equivalent per year, which represent the emissions of 4,300 cars or 65 buses a year. Our next steps will deepen all these changes. We will analyze the development of a BRT system across avenues as has never been done in Argentina before. Buenos Aires will launch 4 new corridors in the second semester of 2014 and the first month of the 15. 2015 will finalize with 56 kilometers of BRT connecting main transport hubs of the city. 1.2 million people will be benefit in only 5 years, which is the same amount that today uses the subway. In addition, the national government that originally criticized it has just announced the construction of a BRT in the suburbs of Buenos Aires that will reduce the cars entering the city every day. We are also going towards an automated bike-sharing system that allows us to catch up with the increasing growth in demand for cycling. Now, we have 700 public free bikes. We started with the system 2 years ago, and by the end of this year, we'll have 3,000. By then, 90% of the streets in the city central area will give priority to pedestrians and cyclists, and car traffic will be reduced by almost half of what is today. The positive environment impact can already be seen in any of the central area streets. There is less noise and better air quality. By 2015, it is estimated that the reduction of greenhouse gases emission will reach 49,000 CO2 equivalent tons, which represents 9% of the target set for the city of Buenos Aires. It's very gratifying to improve our present, knowing that we are also constructing our better future. Only 4 years ago, Buenos Aires did not have BRTs. Bikes were used only for recreation and sports, and pedestrian streets were a rare thing. The change that is on its way is already huge, and benefits highly recognized in the city. 6 months ago, we won the midterm election by far, and our government today has 73% approval on recent polls, the highest ever for a government in our city. When we ask what's the best thing this government has done, by far the most mentioned is BRT. However, on the process, difficulties are everywhere. The opposition try to block it, press criticize every step, and people that do not perceive the benefits in advance is naturally reluctant to change. But with strong conviction, good technical support, consistent communication, teamwork, and a very, very strong political support, everything is possible. In 2013, in only 7 months, we produced one of the most radical changes in the city, in an avenue that identifies us through the world. Today, Metrobús 9 de Julio, BRT, 9 de Julio BRT is a message for everyone, a message that change is possible. Cities are dynamic. If we develop the infrastructure, cultural changes take place, just as it is happening in Buenos Aires today. Just let me show you in a minute and a half video so you see the transformation in the 9 de Julio Avenue. We claim to have the widest avenue in the world, which is, I'm not sure if it's exactly true, but the obelisco is the landmark of Buenos Aires. All the pictures of Buenos Aires, you'll see that monument. You see there's a corridor for bus stops in the middle. But more impressive that what I can show in a 1-minute video or what can I say here is that you come and visit us and see it by yourself. So you are all invited. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's just incredible what Buenos Aires has done in the last few years, and I do encourage everybody to go down there. The first winner of the Sustainable Transport Award was Seoul, Korea, which implemented some BRT along a couple of main corridors, and at the same time it took a major elevated highway down and removed it and turned it into a linear river park, one of the most spectacular urban transformations we'd seen to that date. And we now have the pleasure to hear from Dr. Choi Young-soo, who is the Director of Climate Change and Air Quality Management for the City of Seoul.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to introduce the Seoul BRT system to the representative from of the world. You know, greenhouse gas emission is very serious situation. In Seoul, the ratio of greenhouse gas emission about 30% is from the transportation, about 60% from the building. So we focus on the transportation policy as well. Seoul encounter new area of public transportation along with the economical development, you know, like this. In the past, as a consequence of the more frequent travelers, traffic increased, and this lead to speed of the bus travel decreasing. You can see this. Before the public transportation reform, the vicious circle was chronic. Bus users were decreasing. The revenue also decreased. There was a limited number of bus routes. Bus fares increased, and the low-quality bus service was given due to the car-oriented transportation policy. Seoul encouraged the public transportation rather than car, you know. And so public transportation reform started not as a choice, but as a must, you know. In the summer of 2004, public transportation reform was launched to alleviate the people's dissatisfaction. Bus operating system changed, infrastructure was enhanced, and the assistance system was prepared. So consensus was formed gradually, along with the facility enhancement. The semi-public bus operation, BRT, and the integrated transit fare system are some examples in detail. The next section is about the bus priority system, bus rapid transit. The characteristics of the BRT are to on time, fast, and of convenience. BRT has exclusive lanes and stops in the middle of the road, as you can see from the pictures. Previously, we had the side bus stops, while we competed with fellow cars and other vehicles causing traffic. You can see the picture like this. But now we have special lanes for bus only. The roadside bus lane were converted to median exclusive bus lanes. As the bus lane were installed in the middle of the road, safety becoming a big issue. So, safety facility such as signs and move traffic lights were installed in order to reduce traffic accidents and for the citizens to cross at the correct time and to forbid them from crossing randomly. Other comforts are bus shelters with roof heaters and heating seats, as well as the bus information system, which used LCD TV. You can see like this. The bus information system was introduced through the bus information terminals. Citizens can find out the first and last arrival times of the buses that day, the waiting times, and upcoming buses. You can see that this is what time waiting like this. In Korean, 분 is the minutes, 20 minutes, 10 minutes like this. This is bus numbers. The distance-based integrated fare system was introduced. Before reform, it was 2,101, which equals to about $2. After reform, it became approximately $1. It means very decreased the fare. Another beneficial fact that even my daughter, who studied abroad, didn't know while visiting Korea this winter was that you can have free transfers between buses and subways as long as you use the same travel card. Let me tell you more about the smart card system. We call it T-Money. T is for transportation. The transit fare is calculated automatically by distance traveled. Existing credit card can also be used for deferred payment. Recently, a new system was built to secure national level compatibility of smart card. My daughter Jenny went to holiday to other parts of the South Korea besides Seoul, such as Busan, and used the same smart card not only for traveling but for shopping also. This means that you can use the smart card not only in Seoul, but also everywhere in Korea. Prepared card is also available for teenagers and children as well. Now, 115.3 kilometers of BRT lines have been installed in 12 corridors, which will be expanded in the future. You can see the picture, the before, the after we changed. Also, the Sinchon is the before changed. Cheongyangni is the kind of the big station near the big station before. Now changed, the big changed. Also, Seoul station, the before, like this. You can see the like this, changed like this, buses. Easy transportation, train, subway, bus, taxi, airport shuttle as well. The population of the Seoul, 10 million, is very density, just only 605 square meters, so very density. So our policy encourages transportation, public transportation, such as buses, subway, rather than car. So we try to develop the BRT system as well. You can see the picture, lots of car, just only lane, bus lane like this. This picture is very happy. Anyway, thank you. Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna ask the panelists to join us up at the podium, and then we can answer some questions. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask our panelists about the presentations they just saw? Questions? Anybody? Questions? I guess I'll start with a question then. I guess I'd like to ask at least all of the panelists perhaps. But the thing that I'm finding as we go around the world, communities often resist some of the changes that are necessary to implement a high-quality BRT system. They want to put in parking, don't want to lose their parking space, or they don't want to lose their left turns, or they don't like the idea of BRT. I would like to maybe start with Mr. Larreta about what kind of community resistance and press resistance you faced, and how did you deal with that, and what might lessons be for some other cities?
We have many resistances. For us, a good experience was to do it in phases and to start with the one we considered the easiest one. Because as I mentioned before, it was only two buses, or only two lines of buses. It was in an avenue which is not the most congested one. But however, it's a very long, so it was very visible. So we started by one. Once we got a very high approval and a very, very good results of this one, we built, let's say, the credibility to go for a more difficult one. But to do, our experience is to go in phases, that worked very well. Another, let's say, lesson is that you need very strong political support. Once one of the critics see you doubting, you are dead. So we have the mayor from the beginning supporting strongly, even with people among our team that doubted, because the change we did in 9 de Julio Avenue. 9 de Julio is the landmark of Buenos Aires. So many journalists say we were crazy to go and destroy 9 de Julio Avenue. Another important thing is the time. I mean, we organized everything to build it very quickly. We built it in 6 to 7 months, while the avenue was already working. I mean, people had to go there. We cut 2, 3, 4 lanes depending on the time of the work. But it was very important to have it very well organized to do it in a shortest possible time. And then we had criticism from anywhere. Most, I wouldn't say all, but most of the journalists, even someone which are not clearly opposite of our government, they all criticize the work. Strong political support. If the mayor is doubting, don't even start, because really what we did in Buenos Aires, the change in the middle of the city is amazing. That's a couple of lessons we can draw from our experience.
Well, our fight now is not really because of the buses, because this fight, everybody gets along with that. In Brazil, we say that all Brazilians have a little of doctor and crazy people. In Brazil, we say that, in Curitiba, we say that besides that, we have an urban planning in each one of the citizens living. So that's usual for us to discuss about urban planning in the streets of Curitiba. But the things that we are fighting for now is because of bikes. So the bikeways are putting the challenge in our hands because most of the stores, they don't want to lose their spots for cars that they have. And when we put bikeways in that place, they get mad. So they say, well, we are losing money because of that. So this is the main problem that we are facing. And once we are going to build 300 kilometers of bikeways until the end of 2016, that was very, and the mayor of Curitiba, he's actually here, Mr. Gustavo Freud is over there. Please rise. He is the guy that is going to change Curitiba for the next years. So the fight is give the street back to the pedestrians and to the bikes, because it belongs to the buses. The vehicles, in the cars in Curitiba are, we have more cars than voters in the city. We have 1.3 million cars for 1.1 voters in the city. In the future, they're going to vote instead of, the cars are going to vote, so that's going to be a problem. For 1.8 million people. So something has to be done. And we are doing this in a very courageous ways. We're not afraid of doing things. As my friend from Buenos Aires did, we did those things very rapidly. The first pedestrian street that we built was in a weekend. Saturday, 12 o'clock, the stores were closed. At that time, they didn't open the whole day. When they came back Monday morning, then we have the pedestrian street downstairs. With the bus system, is the same thing. So, and now we are facing other types of things. And the bike is one of our goals. We want to give the city back to bikes and to the pedestrians. Not only parts of it, but the whole system. We want to create a real network system of bikeways, integrated with the mass transportation system, integrated with pedestrian areas and all of that.
Even with the good policy, we need the participation from the citizens, you know. When we make some policy, we listen to the citizens' opinion and specialists like the professor, for instance, we make the one less new power plant. It means the decrease the greenhouse gas emission. So at the time, we listen to lots of citizens' opinion. And then this policy in BRT is we need the voluntary attend, voluntary agree from the citizen. So we need incentive, benefit. For already I mentioned about this, the fare decreased even if we use the BRT. Next one is the speed. The bus speed is the faster than about 30%. The car speed decreased. So voluntary people choose the public transportation rather than car. But it is not easy anyway. But we try to incentive and benefit together. So as time goes on, citizens realize that what is the best, and then we also pursued mitigation, reduce the greenhouse gas emission. So some people understand our policy.
Audience, anybody have a question for these gentlemen?
Thanks. I'm the Environment Advisor for the Mayor of London, and my question is about, I suppose, hybrid buses and electric buses. We are trialling some electric buses in London to see if they can work under the quite punishing work they have to do, operational about 20 hours a day, and also with diesel-electric hybrid buses. And we've been quite frustrated in that diesel-electric hybrid buses haven't come down in capital cost. And we wondered what ideas other cities had about trying to get their capital costs to come down, we have issues to do with the residual value of the bus, the lifetime of the battery, and things like that. And we've been looking around the world to see what other cities might have solutions to get more hybrid buses onto the streets in order not only to save fuel consumption, but also air quality, which is quite a problem in London. And any ideas you might have to try and bring those capital costs down so that you get the payback within a reasonable time, under around 5 years or so.
Lisa, did you want to say something to that? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Lisa Seftel. I'm from the City of Johannesburg in the Transport Department. We also respond. Oh, sorry. My name is Lisa. I'm from the City of Johannesburg, the Transport Department, and we're also involved in both BRT and also the greening and creating low-carbon fleets. And I had a similar, let me just say, I think the presentations were really interesting and very inspiring and really do mirror the kinds of things that we're also doing in Africa. My question was a follow-up question because in Johannesburg, we have, and as I think the Mayor explained, our choice of preferable fuel for low-carbon fleet is a biogas dual fuel, so biogas plus diesel. And there's a number of technical reasons why we do that, and one of the reasons why we've chosen biogas is because it's potentially can be produced locally from waste, and there's also job creation impact, so it helps us in our whole sort of value chain and being able to contribute to a number of different city objectives. And we were very inspired when we heard that in Brazil, there was a directive that all the new Brazilian BRTs should also use biogas. But we went out to tender to get buses, including for companies that are international, and our tender box was empty. So I think it would be interesting to understand the experience, particularly in Curitiba, because I think you're also doing biogas, and I think also the questions, not only at a technical level, but a price, because we're asking for something which is climate friendly, are we being forced to pay a price premium for it?
Let's take one more question, and then we'll let each of the panelists answer in a group, because we're sort of running up against the time.
Thank you, Walter.
Lucho, yeah, go
This
ahead.
is Luis Gutierrez, General Secretary of the CBRT, the Latin American Association of Integrated System and BRT. I will put in your hands some kind of a hot potato, because a critical issue that we have learned in our experience along Latin America is how to balance quality and financing. Quality is a very important issue to build an alternative for the private car, not to change the paradigm. And the other side, who pay the invoice? Because if we implement a very high quality system covering all the city with a network, transit network, this is very expensive. In the case of Europe, they cover a half of the cost in the transit service. And we have a very spectacular change in Latin America with Santiago de Chile, that the Congress, for unanimous vote, decide to put $700 million to assure that the fares will be not more than a half of the cost. It is really a sort of a policy of the state. So, what is your point of view about this kind of, balance between quality, solution door to door for people, and financing? Who has to pay the invoice?
I think it depends on the country, and it depends on the relationship between the national government and the local one. In our case, we, the city, paid for all the invoice, but compared to the subway, the cost, it is a 50th, 1/50, for each kilometer of BRT compared to a subway. So for us, financing was not a big issue. In terms of quality, it's very, very important to have very good quality technical support and technical analysis when you develop the project. For us, that was key. That was very, very important. We got some advice from the ITDP, from there, and we studied what was going on in other places in the world. We have studied Curitiba's case. No case can be completely exactly translated to your city, but we really put a lot of effort to build a very, very high quality technical team for that. And in our experience, I mean, to develop the whole project, of all the consequences on all the other crossing street, probably if you don't take into account what's going on 10 blocks from the BRT, you can have a bottleneck. So we have I think that's easy to get, a system that you can do all the analysis, but for us it worked very well. But it's important to have a very high quality technical support. It's not rocket science. I mean, we did 3 lines in Buenos Aires, and the 3 are working perfectly, the 3 of them. Again, I think compared to Santiago de Chile, where I think they had a problem when they built it, is that they did all the routes, all the lanes at the same time. In our experience, it's better going lane by lane, starting with an easy one, as I said before.
Well, once we have been dealing with buses for such a long time, we have to improve also in the technology. That's why we went from diesel to biodiesel and all of that, and the hybrid buses. Hybrid buses are very expensive as well. So we are going in the direction of electricity, and we have a very nice energy company in the state. We are getting together with them in order to find solutions for it. And also, the state of Paraná holds the largest electricity dam in the world. It's called Itaipu Dam. So the electricity has a different answer to all of us. So we are putting lots of effort in this first year in order to put these buses together. We have Volvo Industry that is our partner in many projects. So we are going this direction because we think this is the issue. Energy is one of the big issues to be addressed.
First of all, the London mentioned about the electric buses. We already operated the 14 electric buses in Seoul, but one of the problems is the price. The general buses, the price of general buses is about 5 times the electric buses, so it's very expensive. And then another problem is charging system. The fast charging system just only 30 minutes, but the distance is from the electric buses not far. It means the short. So that's the problem. So this is the pilot system now, until now. I think it takes more time to the change from the general buses from the electric buses. And then Seoul already changed the buses from the diesel to CNG, means the gas buses, because Seoul, the Metropolitan government emphasized citizens' health. So air pollution from the diesel, so that's the problem. So we changed all of the buses changed from the diesel to CNG already because decreased air pollution. And then you mentioned about quality. It's very important, quality, because high quality, the service get the citizens. So we try to make a high quality bus system to use the citizens, because rich people use the car instead of public transportation. So city government should kind of welfare for the citizens. So we try to increase the quality for the citizens. Okay.
As the chair, we're running out of time. I do have the prerogative to provide some wrap-up comments. And then hopefully you can meet each other afterwards and ask your questions one-on-one. I guess I wouldn't mind talking a bit about the bus cost issue. I mean, why do we want a different bus? Well, we want to lower the particulate emissions because buses pollute, and the particulates, even in a BRT, get trapped in the BRT station. So there's a health problem from particulate emissions. That's the most important thing. So let's get away from particulates. Now, the CNG bus is pretty good on particulates. It gets the particulates out. A regular diesel or a biodiesel bus probably needs to be a Euro 5 with a particle trap to really solve the problem. And that means you have to spend some additional money, and it depends on whether you have the fuel that you can supply that kind of bus. So those are two problems. But I think that's the way a lot of cities are going. I think we're going to see a lot more CNG. Right now, cities don't like CNG because if something goes wrong in the engine, you have to end up replacing a lot of the engine. So the life cycle cost is really a lot higher than on a regular diesel bus. You should understand about the bus industry that it's actually driven by the truck industry. The big bus manufacturers, 90% of their business is trucks, and they take that same engine and they put it into a bus. So if the truck industry went into hybrids and the truck industry went heavily into CNG, you'd see the bus shifting. But the bus demand is really too low and too specialized to really aggregate. The C40 made a big effort to try to put all the C40 seats together and bring the cost of some of these vehicles down, and it's really been a challenge. It hasn't worked very well. But just going back to why do we want a cleaner bus, when you look at a BRT and how it reduced greenhouse gas emissions, most of the emissions reductions right away come from the fact that your bus system itself is operating much more efficiently. Your buses are going faster, using less fuel, because they're not stuck in traffic, and as a result, you need a lot fewer buses to make the same number of trips. So most of the emissions benefit from BRT has nothing to do with the bus type. You're also getting some carbon emission benefit because people are shifting from their cars or their motorcycles to the BRT and leaving their cars at home, and you're getting another big carbon benefit from that. And third, because of that modal shift, you're improving the rest of the traffic. So those are your big reasons carbon benefits come from BRT, and only about 10% on the margin comes from whether your bus is cleaner or less clean. So that's why we don't overly focus on the vehicle type. Now, I really like Lucho's question about cost versus quality, and that's something we wrestle with a lot. And what we're finding is when we look at systems and how they perform under the BRT standard, the things that really matter, 90% of them are not questions of cost, they're questions of political will. It doesn't cost anything to build a dedicated bus lane. It just costs paint and enforcement. And it's nice to have some rigid barriers, but the cost is trivial. The next most important thing from a speed perspective is banning turns across the busway. And this is a pure question of political will. It doesn't cost anything. So the other elements of BRT, there is some cost ramifications. If you build nice stations, they cost a little bit of extra money. However, what we're finding is really nice stations tend to increase the value of real estate around those stations, and it's all earned back more than the original investment in the form of additional city revenues from property taxation or betterment taxation or tax increment financing. Mostly it pays for itself. And the remainder of the BRT elements that cost a bit of money, the off-board fare collection, more than pay for itself in the form of reduced operating costs. Most of your BRT systems don't have to be subsidized at all. Now, if you build BRT in the wrong corridor, or you build it with extremely expensive stations or very expensive technology, or you have very cumbersome bureaucratic procedures you have to go through, that could increase your cost. But by and large, BRT is really about reducing operating costs. It's not really a cost. It's not really a cost. It's actually mostly a benefit. So I guess I'd like to conclude with those comments. And I'd really like to thank the panel. You've had a chance to hear from 3 of the best performing cities in the world. Thanks very much for joining us here.